No era has defined Japanese street fashion more than the 90s. It is the era that most Westerners view as definitively Japanese. The immense amount of brands, collections, contemporaries, and tastemakers that come from the decade are still lauded today. And since this time, Japan, Tokyo in particular, maintains its status as the street fashion capital of the world. I'm your boy Reggie Casual, and this is the history of Japanese street fashion, the 90s. Let's get it. By the end of the 80s, young Japanese adults started focusing more on maturity and stability, leading to the second wave of shibukaji, or Shibuya casual. Individuals who partook in these movements focused more on coordination and texture, and as a result, how you wore something was more important than what you were wearing. This focus led to a variety of different interpretations on each style from person to person. The 90s brought on even more import silhouettes than the 80s in Japan, such as the Antwerp 6 and import mix movements of the early 90s. Many men also engaged in French casual, where brands like Agnes B became popular and accessories like berets were frequently worn. In fact, throughout the early 90s, French casual became the standard and rage in Japan for both males and females. However, offshoot styles for ladies included things like paragyaru or paradise girl, which expressed an LA resort style, or among men, smaller, more effeminate movements like the emergence of femme-mio. However, other movements were far more in vogue for both men and ladies. Body conscious, or bodycon for short, among women became especially popular during this time. This style encouraged slim and bodyline silhouettes that suggested a sexier figure, which had hardly been seen in Japan up until this point. The showing of skin and revealing nature showed signs of growing maturity among the young Japanese fashion-forward woman. The men's counterpart to bodycon was grunge, which followed the American grunge movement in the early 90s off the coattails of Kurt Cobain's popularity worldwide. But American styles would go even further in Japan in the 90s, but the looks became more influenced by regional lifestyles. Outdoor American styles became popular for men, mixing in shirling and down jackets with common functional brands like North Face and Patagonia with a splash of bright colors, while women looked the other direction with country styles reminiscent of the Native American West. However, it was by 1993 that the entire landscape of Japanese fashion would become uniquely Japanese with the founding of the Urahara movement. Now, the Urahara is the name of the back streets of Harajuku, filled with lifestyle brands that historically have had significant impacts to the Japanese street fashion scene as a whole. The Urahara movement itself can have an entire segment of its own because the list of brands and designers coming from this time are long, but the most notable are the ones that follow. GoodEnough, started by streetwear godfather Hiroshi Fujiwara, opened in 1990. The Nowhere Store, spearheaded by Jun Takahashi and NIGO, opened in 93. That same year, Tetsu Nishiyama started 40% Against Rights. In 94, Shunsuke Takizawa's Neighborhood. 95, Bounty Hunter. 96, Tetsu Nishiyama's second brand, Double Taps, opens. Same year, Takahiro Miyashita starts number 9, and in 97, Masaki Homa's Mastermind, so on and so forth. The Urahara movement was a time of immense exposure of Western pop culture brought on by the likes of ambitious tastemakers like Fujiwara and NIGO, and set the stage for both men's and women's fashion to a more street-centric androgyny that remains prevalent in Japan today. But that wasn't the only style and movement that was set forth by the Japanese. However, it was certainly the most impactful domestically. In 1994, Jun Takahashi's Undercover became so popular among the young adults and youth, it became in and of itself the trend of 94 for both men and women. The anti-fashion brought forth by the likes of Yohji Yamamoto and CDG's Rei Kawakubo was taken over by the prodigy designer in a mix that defined street, design precision, and punk all in one package, leading the charge of the mid-90s Urahara movement, and has since been what has defined Japanese fashion deconstruction from a street perspective. As a result, military mixed styles would emerge in 95 for men following the opening of Tetsu Nishiyama's 40% Against Rights, and subsequently more influential line Double Taps in 96. Teen girls, on the other hand, experimented with tomboy fashion from the likes of brands like X-Girl, all while Japan was experiencing its first sneaker boom that highlighted sneakers like Jordan 1s, Air Max 95s, Adidas Superstars, Nike Cortezes, and brands like New Balance. By the end of 96, the Urahara movement had hit full stride. Brands like A Bathing Ape in Lukewarm Water, GoodEnough, double taps, and Undercover had reached their peak. Japanese street fashion from this point would become set in stone as an amalgamation of different lifestyles and pop culture, but uniquely Japanese, and above all, consistent. Younger girls, however, began their own movement based on the popularity of Japanese singer, producer, designer Tomoe Shinohara. Dubbed Shinora by the Japanese and simply Harajuku girl by the West, this movement was certainly prevalent in Japan during this time, but it also becomes the point where Japanese fashion becomes entirely misinterpreted by the West. And this is mainly due to its colorful, bubbly style that is uniquely Japanese. And as a result, the Shinora continues to prevail as Japan's most popular style outside of Japan due to its exposure made by particular artists from the West, namely Gwen Stefani, who became enamored with the style and subsequently made it popular globally. However, it's important to note that Shinora is not everywhere, as the Western image would probably have you believe. It is at a small contingent of styles that started in the 90s, among others. As we move on to the late 90s, around 97 to be exact, men started adapting the Urahara style to hip-hop in a style that the Japanese would call B-boy, which was slightly different than the B-boy dancers we all know from the West. Now, this movement included baggy hip-hop silhouettes, and they became trendset for men with brands like Tommy Hilfiger and Timberland making a big impact. Women in the same arena would follow Japanese pop star sensation Namie Amuro. In fact, women experienced several segments of the style dubbed kogyaru. On one level, the kawaii schoolgirl look identified by those loose build-up socks became incredibly popular, while the mini skirt and long leather boot style of the aforementioned Namie Amuro became more popular among the older, more sophisticated crowd. These girls would branch into a segment called Amura. By the end of the 90s, Japanese street fashion became more conservative yet fused with a traditional aesthetic, adding to its mysticism. The Urahara movement was so influential that women started picking up boyish styles and men started experimenting with more vintage clothing like the new vintage movement of '99. Outside of the outlier ganguro style for women, Japanese fashion becomes more subdued and lifestyle driven, effectively making the country a place where fashion styles and movements are preserved. The 90s of Japanese fashion are its most important period, its golden age. It was a period of defining what it meant to be fashion forward in Japan, where lifestyle was just as important as the look and experimentation was paramount. And juxtaposed to American fashion in particular, it wasn't competitive. Your fashion sense told the story of who you were, what you like, what you do, and who you associated with. And with so many styles emerging, it was a time of incredible diversity. But you can only ride the wave for so long. For every peak, there is a valley. And while the 2000s were certainly influential in their own right when it comes to fashion, the economic downturn of the early 2000s didn't bode well for all of Japan. Department stores and vintage shops would capitalize on this during the next decade, and Western street brands would begin to make their move to Tokyo to expand their reach. But that's a story for another time when we look at the 2000s, when Western celebrity culture finally makes huge strides in Japan. Until then, give a thumbs up if you like this video, but most importantly, keep it locked right here for all of your info on international street fashion and culture from Tokyo. It's your boy, and keep it casual. Yoroshiku onegai shimasu, and I'll see you guys in a minute. You can check out more videos from The Casual by checking these guys out right over here. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram. You can even follow me personally. That's always fun, just to stay updated on the latest. But most importantly, YouTube からのアップデートのために下の丸を押してくださいませ。To stay updated on YouTube, press the circle below me.